The Boeing 737 descended through turbulent clouds above Norfolk International Airport, its aluminum fuselage catching the dying light of a Virginia sunset. In seat 14A, a woman with graying auburn hair and weathered hands gripped a worn leather journal, her fingers tracing the embossed eagle insignia on its cover. The passengers around her saw only another middle-aged traveler in faded jeans and a simple cotton sweater. But Commander Veronica, Ghostwriter, Castellanos, had just completed a journey that would reshape military aviation history forever. 3 rows behind her, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torres adjusted his civilian clothes and tried to process what he'd witnessed 12 hours earlier at Ramstein Air Base. The woman in 14A had walked onto the tarmac with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there, yet no one seemed to recognize her. No ceremony, no fanfare, just a nod from the base commander and a black sedan that disappeared into the German countryside. Torres had been returning from a classified operation when he glimpsed her boarding the same commercial flight, and something about her bearing triggered his operational instincts. Former military, definitely. But there was something else, an aura of command that made seasoned warriors unconsciously straighten their spines. The aircraft shuddered as it encountered another pocket of rough air, and Torres watched the woman in 14A while other passengers tensed and gripped their armrests. She remained perfectly still, her eyes focused on something beyond the small window. Her breathing was controlled, measured, the kind of calm that only came from years of flying through much worse than commercial turbulence. A flight attendant approached, offering reassurance, but the woman simply smiled and declined with a gesture that somehow conveyed both gratitude and absolute composure. As the plane banked left for its final approach, Torres caught sight of Naval Station Norfolk's sprawling complex below. Somewhere in that maze of hangars and administrative buildings, decisions were being made that would echo through decades of military history. The woman in 14A had been part of those discussions, though her role remained a mystery wrapped in the mundane disguise of commercial air travel. The landing was smooth despite the earlier turbulence, and as passengers began the familiar ritual of gathering belongings, Torres noticed something that made him freeze. The woman's journal had fallen slightly open, revealing what appeared to be technical schematics and handwritten notes in precise military script. But it was the signature at the bottom of the visible page that stopped his breath. V. Castellanos, followed by a date from 23 years ago, and coordinates that placed her over the skis of Bosnia during the height of NATO's Operation Deliberate Force. The plane taxied toward the terminal, and Torres realized he was looking at someone who had helped write the playbook for modern air combat, yet flew commercial because her contributions had been buried so deep in classified files that even legends could walk unrecognized through civilian airports. Veronica Castellanos had been 17 when she first touched the controls of a Cessna 152 at a small airfield outside Corpus Christi, Texas. Her father, a mechanic who'd lost his left arm in Vietnam, had saved for 3 years to pay for her flying lessons, believing that the sky held opportunities denied to him by circumstance and war. She'd soloed after 8 hours of dual instruction, a record at the flight school, and her instructor, a grizzled ex-Air Force pilot named Dutch Morrison, had written in his logbook, "This kid doesn't fly airplanes, she thinks in 3 dimensions." By 19, she was accepted into the Naval Academy despite guidance counselors who'd steered her toward more practical pursuits like nursing or education. The year was 1987, and women in combat aviation remained a controversial concept wrapped in regulations and old boy network resistance. Castellanos didn't argue politics. She simply outperformed every metric they used to measure pilot potential. Her academic scores placed her in the top 5%. Her physical fitness ratings exceeded male averages, and her spatial reasoning abilities fell into ranges typically reserved for test pilots. The academy years were a masterclass in persistence under pressure. While male classmates formed easy bonds over shared experiences and cultural references, Castellanos found herself constantly proving worthiness for acceptance that others took as birthright. She studied while others socialized, flew simulator hours while others slept, and maintained perfect uniform standards while others received warnings. Her call sign emerged during a particularly brutal training evolution, when she seemed to materialize in cockpits without anyone noticing her approach, earning respect through competence rather than camaraderie. Flight school at Pensacola revealed her true element. The T-34C Turbo Mentor felt like an extension of her nervous system, responding to inputs with precision that impressed instructors accustomed to managing student pilot mistakes. She mastered carrier landing techniques with the focused intensity of someone who understood that perfection wasn't a goal but a survival requirement. Her logbook filled with commendations written in the careful script of aviators who recognized exceptional talent when they witnessed it. The selection process for fighter aircraft training remained a political minefield in the early 1990s, but Castellanos' performance made exclusion impossible to justify. She'd graduated first in her flight training class, demonstrated superior tactical awareness during combat maneuvering exercises, and exhibited the kind of unflappable composure under stress that separated warriors from mere pilots. When the FA-18 Hornet assignments were announced, her name appeared on a list that would eventually include some of the Navy's most distinguished aviators. Her first squadron assignment placed her aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, where she encountered the complex social dynamics of carrier aviation. The ship's air wing represented a microcosm of military culture at its most traditional and resistant to change. Yet Castellanos navigated these waters with the same precision she brought to night carrier landings in rough seas. The Mediterranean deployment of 1994 transformed Veronica Castellanos from a competent pilot into something approaching legend, though the full scope of her contributions would remain classified for decades. The USS Theodore Roosevelt's Air Wing had been tasked with enforcing the no-fly zone over Bosnia-Herzegovina, a mission that required precision, restraint, and the ability to make split-second decisions with international consequences. Castellanos, now holding the rank of lieutenant and the call sign Ghostwriter, had established herself as one of the most reliable pilots in VFA 102, the Diamondbacks. On a gray morning in November, with the Adriatic Sea churning beneath low-hanging clouds, Castellanos received a mission briefing that would test every aspect of her training. Intelligence reports indicated that Serbian forces were preparing a major offensive against UN-protected safe areas, using surface-to-air missile systems that posed significant threats to NATO aircraft. The mission profile called for a reconnaissance sweep, followed by precision strikes on identified targets, a complex operation requiring perfect coordination between multiple aircraft and ground controllers. Castellanos pre-flighted her FA-18C Hornet with the methodical attention to detail that had become her trademark. Every switch, every system, every weapon mount received scrutiny that bordered on obsessive. Her crew chief, a 20-year veteran named Petty Officer Rodriguez, watched with approval as she checked items that younger pilots often overlooked. "Skipper's got that look again," he muttered to his assistant. "Something big's brewing." The launch sequence from the Theodore Roosevelt's deck unfolded with choreographed precision. Steam catapults hurled 30-ton aircraft from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds, a violent acceleration that never lost its edge despite hundreds of repetitions. Castellanos felt the familiar compression against her ejection seat as her Hornet cleared the deck and climbed toward the assigned altitude, joining a formation that represented the cutting edge of American air power. Radio communications crackled through her headset as the strike package assembled over the gray waters. "Ghostwriter, this is Warhawk Lead. Check in when ready for tactical frequency." Her response carried the calm professionalism that had earned respect from pilots who'd initially questioned her presence in their ranks. Ghost Rider ready, switches hot, systems green. The acknowledgement came back with a tone that suggested full confidence in her capabilities. As the formation turned toward the coast of Bosnia, Castellanos reviewed the intelligence package one final time. The targets were legitimate military installations, but their proximity to civilian areas demanded precision that left no margin for error. She adjusted her helmet-mounted display, verified her weapon system configurations, and prepared to demonstrate why competence, not gender, determined effectiveness in combat aviation. The intelligence briefing had identified a complex of surface-to-air missile sites hidden within the mountainous terrain near Banja Luka, but as Castellanos' formation approached the target area, the tactical situation began evolving in ways that no planning session could have anticipated. Electronic warfare systems aboard the supporting EA-6B Prowler detected multiple radar signatures painting their aircraft, indicating a more sophisticated air defense network than originally assessed. The Serbian forces had anticipated NATO's operational patterns and prepared accordingly. Ghost Rider, Warhawk lead, we're seeing SAM activity bearing 270 degrees, adjust heading to avoid engagement envelope. Castellanos acknowledged the transmission while simultaneously analyzing her threat warning display. The angular mountain ridges below provided natural cover, but also created radar shadows where additional threats might remain hidden. Her training had emphasized the importance of situational awareness in complex air defense environments, and every instinct suggested this mission would test those skills. The formation spread into combat spread formation, increasing lateral separation to minimize collective vulnerability while maintaining mutual support. Castellanos flew her assigned position with precision, her aircraft's radar painting targets while defensive systems monitored for incoming threats. The FA-18's multi-mode radar distinguished between ground targets, airborne threats, and electronic countermeasures with reliability that had made it the Navy's premier strike fighter. But success still depended on pilot skill in interpreting and acting on the data presented. Multiple bandits, bearing 090 degrees, altitude unknown. All flights expedite to assigned stations. The air controller's voice carried urgency that elevated everyone's alert status. Castellanos checked her air-to-air missiles while maintaining focus on the primary mission. The strike package had been configured primarily for ground attack, but the fluid nature of air combat required constant readiness to shift roles from striker to fighter. Her threat warning receiver suddenly activated with a distinctive tone indicating missile lock. Training took over as she executed defensive maneuvers while transmitting warnings to other flights. The SAM system had acquired her aircraft despite electronic countermeasures, forcing immediate evasive action that would test both machine and pilot capabilities. She rolled inverted and pulled toward the Earth, using gravity and terrain masking to break the missile's tracking solution. The surface-to-air missile streaked past her canopy close enough to see its exhaust trail, a reminder that combat aviation remained an unforgiving profession regardless of technological advantages. Castellanos recovered from her defensive maneuver and rejoined the formation, her heart rate elevated but her hands steady on the controls. Ghost Riders back up, continuing to assign station. The calm delivery of this transmission would become part of squadron lore, exemplifying grace under pressure. The strike against the missile complex required precision that pushed both aircraft and pilot to operational limits. Castellanos rolled in from a high angle of attack, her targeting systems locked onto structures that represented significant threats to future NATO operations. The laser-guided bomb's impact created secondary explosion that confirmed the intelligence assessment of stored munitions, eliminating a capability that could have cost Allied lives in subsequent missions. The aftermath of the successful strike revealed the broader implications of Castellanos' performance under extreme conditions. Intelligence analysts would later confirm that the missile complex had been one of the most sophisticated in Serbian inventory, capable of engaging multiple aircraft simultaneously, and coordinated with other sites to create overlapping fields of fire. The precision required to eliminate such targets, while avoiding civilian casualties, demanded skills that existed at the intersection of technology, training, and natural ability. Squadron mates who had initially viewed Castellanos with skepticism began recognizing that competence transcended demographic categories. Her consistent performance during high-stress combat missions demonstrated qualities that couldn't be taught in flight school: situational awareness that bordered on prescient, decision-making under pressure that consistently chose optimal solutions, and technical proficiency that maximized aircraft capabilities while minimizing exposure to threats. The mission reports filed after the Bosnia strikes would remain classified for decades, but their impact on naval aviation policy began immediately. Castellanos' demonstrated abilities provided empirical evidence supporting broader integration of women in combat roles, though she remained focused on operational responsibilities rather than political implications. Her logbook entries during this period reflected professional satisfaction with mission accomplishment rather than awareness of her role in military history. The Roosevelt's Air Wing completed its Mediterranean deployment, with Castellanos firmly established as one of its most effective pilots. Her performance had earned respect from squadron commanders, who measured results rather than rhetoric, and her tactical innovations during combat missions were incorporated into training curricula that would influence naval aviation for decades. Yet the full scope of her contributions would remain hidden within classified files that protected operational details from potential adversaries. Return to Norfolk marked the beginning of a new phase in Castellanos' career, though she couldn't have anticipated how her Bosnia experience would intersect with technological developments that would revolutionize air combat. Defense contractors were developing stealth aircraft capabilities that required pilots who could integrate advanced systems with tactical expertise, and her combination of combat experience and technical proficiency made her an ideal candidate for programs that didn't officially exist. The selection process for what would eventually become known as the F-22 test program involved psychological evaluations, technical assessments, and security clearances that few officers ever encountered. Castellanos navigated these requirements with the same methodical approach she brought to combat missions, understanding that every question and evaluation served purposes beyond the obvious. Her service record spoke to competence under pressure, but the psychological profiles sought qualities that couldn't be measured through conventional metrics. Test pilot training at Edwards Air Force Base represented a cultural shift from operational squadrons to experimental flight programs. The pilots selected for advanced aircraft development possessed unique combinations of technical knowledge, risk assessment abilities, and communication skills necessary to document performance characteristics for aircraft that would define air superiority for decades. Castellanos found herself among aviators whose names would appear in aerospace history books, though their contributions would remain classified until long after their careers ended. The F-22 Raptor program demanded pilots who could evaluate aircraft systems while operating at the edges of flight envelopes that had never been explored. Supersonic maneuverability, advanced stealth characteristics, and integrated avionics systems created capabilities that required new tactical doctrines, and test pilots served as the bridge between engineering theory and operational reality. Castellanos' first flight in the prototype aircraft revealed capabilities that exceeded even optimistic projections from design teams. Her test reports, written in precise technical language that avoided emotional descriptors, documented aircraft performance with scientific rigor that impressed engineers accustomed to managing pilot enthusiasm. The F-22's ability to achieve supersonic cruise without afterburners, maintain stealth characteristics across multiple radar frequencies, and integrate sensor data from multiple sources created tactical advantages that would reshape air combat doctrine. Castellano's role in validating these capabilities placed her at the center of the most significant advance in fighter aircraft since jet propulsion. The classified nature of the F-22 program meant that Castellano's contributions would remain hidden from public recognition, though her influence on aircraft development extended far beyond individual flight tests. Her recommendations for cockpit ergonomics, system integration priorities, and tactical employment concepts were incorporated into production aircraft that would serve as the foundation for American air superiority well into the 21st century. Years of test flying had taught Castellanos to recognize the subtle differences between theoretical performance and operational reality, skills that proved invaluable as the F-22 program transitioned from experimental to production phases. Her final report on the aircraft's combat readiness represented the culmination of hundreds of flight hours exploring performance envelopes that few pilots would ever experience. Yet her name would appear nowhere in the public documentation of the program's success. The transition from test pilot to staff officer might have seemed anticlimactic after years of flying experimental aircraft. But Castellanos understood that her experience with advanced systems qualified her for strategic planning responsibilities that could influence military aviation for decades. Her assignment to the Pentagon placed her within the bureaucratic machinery that translated technological capabilities into operational doctrines, acquisition programs, and training requirements that would shape the next generation of combat pilots. The sterile corridors and fluorescent-lit offices of the Pentagon seemed far removed from the cockpits where she'd built her reputation. Yet the decisions made in those conference rooms would determine how her hard-won expertise would be preserved and transmitted to future aviators. Castellanos found herself briefing senior officers on aircraft capabilities they'd never personally experienced, translating technical specifications into strategic implications that would guide procurement decisions involving billions of dollars and thousands of careers. Her experience with classified programs created a unique perspective on the relationship between secrecy and effectiveness in military operations. The technologies she'd helped validate would provide decisive advantages in future conflicts, but their classified nature limited the military's ability to demonstrate their capabilities to potential adversaries or congressional oversight committees. Castellanos navigated these political complexities with the same precision she'd brought to test flying, understanding that effective communication required adapting technical realities to audiences with different backgrounds and priorities. The briefings she delivered to Joint Chiefs, defense secretaries, and congressional committees became legendary within Pentagon circles for their clarity and credibility. Her ability to explain complex systems in language that non-pilots could understand, while maintaining technical accuracy that satisfied engineering experts, made her one of the most sought-after briefers on advanced aviation programs. Yet her name remained absent from public records, another classified detail in programs that would reshape military aviation. Her influence extended beyond individual programs to fundamental questions about pilot training, aircraft acquisition priorities, and international cooperation on advanced systems. Castellanos' recommendations shaped policies that would determine how the military would prepare pilots for aircraft that wouldn't enter service for decades, requiring institutional planning that spanned entire careers and multiple generations of technology. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on her. The more successful her contributions became, the more completely they disappeared into classified archives. Her role in developing aircraft that would dominate air combat for 50 years would remain hidden, while her innovations in training and tactics would influence thousands of pilots who would never know the source of the doctrines they learned. The decision to retire came not from fatigue with military service, but from recognition that her contributions had reached a natural conclusion. The systems she'd helped develop were entering operational service. The training programs she designed were producing qualified pilots, and the strategic frameworks she'd influenced were guiding procurement decisions that would extend far beyond her active duty career. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered in the measured tones of someone accustomed to discussing matters that couldn't be recorded or acknowledged. "Commander Castellanos, we need your expertise for a situation that's developed overseas. Can you be at Andrews in 2 hours?" The question carried implications that transcended simple consultation. Somewhere in the world, a crisis was unfolding that required her unique combination of technical knowledge and operational experience. The flight to Germany aboard a military transport aircraft provided time to review classified briefing materials that painted a disturbing picture of international tensions escalating toward potential conflict. A rogue state had acquired advanced surface-to-air missile systems through black market arms dealers, creating a threat environment that could neutralize conventional air power and destabilize an entire region. The situation required someone who understood both the capabilities of American stealth aircraft and the limitations of existing defensive systems. Ramstein Air Base bustled with activity that suggested operations extending far beyond routine training exercises. Transport aircraft arrived hourly carrying personnel and equipment that would support what appeared to be a major deployment, though the official cover story described routine NATO exercises. Castellanos recognized the controlled urgency that preceded significant military operations, the kind of purposeful activity that preceded missions, whose success would be measured in lives saved rather than headlines generated. The briefing facility was located in a secure building that required multiple security clearances to access, its conference rooms equipped with communication systems that could reach anywhere in the world through encrypted channels. Maps covered the walls displaying terrain features that would influence aircraft routing, threat locations that required careful navigation, and targets whose destruction would eliminate capabilities that threatened regional stability. General Patricia Morrison, the first woman to command a major air operation, welcomed Castellanos with the professional respect accorded to proven expertise rather than ceremonial courtesy. "Veronica, we need someone who understands both F-22 capabilities and the missile systems we're facing. Your test pilot experience gives you insights that our current operational pilots simply don't possess." The tactical situation was more complex than initial intelligence had suggested. The rogue state had integrated multiple missile systems into a networked air defense that could track and engage stealth aircraft, using techniques that hadn't existed when existing countermeasures were developed. Successfully neutralizing these threats would require tactics that pushed both aircraft and pilots beyond established doctrine, innovations that could only come from someone who understood the absolute limits of system performance. Castellanos studied the intelligence materials with the analytical rigor she'd brought to test flying, identifying patterns and vulnerabilities that might provide tactical opportunities. The missile systems were sophisticated, but their integration revealed architectural weaknesses that could be exploited by pilots who understood the subtle electromagnetic signatures that betrayed targeting solutions. Her tactical recommendations would require precision flying that few operational pilots had ever attempted, maneuvers that existed at the intersection of aircraft performance limits and stealth technology boundaries. The mission profile she developed pushed every system to its maximum capability, while maintaining the coordination necessary for success against integrated air defenses. The operation briefing brought together pilots from multiple squadrons, each selected for specific skills that would contribute to the mission's success. As Castellanos outlined the tactical approach, she could see the recognition in their eyes. They understood they were receiving insights from someone who had helped define the capabilities they would employ in combat. Her credibility came not from rank or position, but from knowledge earned through years of pushing aircraft to their absolute limits. The mission launched before dawn on a morning when low clouds provided natural concealment for aircraft departing Ramstein. Castellanos wasn't flying the operation. Her role was consultation and real-time analysis, but her tactical recommendations would guide every phase of the strike. The Secure Communications Center allowed her to monitor the mission's progress through encrypted data links that provided unprecedented situational awareness of air combat as it developed. The stealth aircraft approached their targets using routes and altitudes that Castellanos had specified based on her understanding of both aircraft capabilities and threat system limitations. Each course change, altitude adjustment, and timing modification reflected her analysis of electromagnetic signatures that would determine success or failure. The pilots executed her tactical recommendations with precision that validated years of training and selection. The missile sites were eliminated with surgical precision that demonstrated the effectiveness of combining advanced technology with tactical expertise. Castellanos' recommendations had enabled the mission to succeed without losing aircraft or causing collateral damage, achievements that would prevent regional conflict while preserving American technological advantages. Her role in the operation would never be publicly acknowledged, but the strategic implications of success would influence international relations for decades. The aftermath of the successful operation revealed the full scope of Castellanos' contributions to modern military aviation. Her expertise had enabled the United States to project power while maintaining technological secrecy, demonstrating capabilities without revealing methods, and achieving strategic objectives through precision rather than overwhelming force. The combination of her test pilot experience, tactical innovation, and strategic understanding had proved invaluable in ways that conventional military careers rarely achieved. General Morrison's private debrief acknowledged what couldn't be stated in official reports. Castellanos had made the crucial difference between mission success and potential strategic disaster. "Your tactical recommendations made the impossible look routine," she observed. "That's the mark of true expertise, making the extraordinary appear effortless." The flight back to the United States provided time for reflection on a career that had spanned fundamental changes in military aviation. Castellanos had witnessed the transition from analog flight controls to digital systems, from conventional aircraft to stealth technology, from individual pilot skills to networked combat capabilities. Her contributions had influenced each of these developments, though her role would remain hidden in classified archives. The commercial airline boarding process at Frankfurt reminded her of the contrast between military precision and civilian routine, yet she found comfort in the anonymity of Seat 14A aboard the Boeing 737. No one on the aircraft would recognize the woman who had helped validate the technologies that assured American air superiority, nor would they understand the strategic implications of the successful operation that had concluded hours earlier. As the aircraft climbed through the clouds above Germany, Castellanos opened her leather journal and began writing the final entry in a career that had spanned 3 decades of military aviation evolution. Her words captured not the classified details of operations and programs, but the personal satisfaction of having contributed to capabilities that would protect American interests and save lives for generations to come. The journal's pages contain the real record of her service. Technical observations from test flights that pushed aircraft to their limits, tactical innovations developed under combat conditions, strategic insights that influenced acquisition programs, and personal reflections on the responsibilities that came with unique expertise. Future historians would never read these entries, but they represented the authentic documentation of contributions that had shaped military aviation's most significant advances. Her retirement from active duty would mark the end of visible service, but Castellanos understood that her influence would continue through the aircraft she'd helped develop, the tactics she'd validated, and the pilots she'd trained. The technologies and techniques she'd contributed to would serve American interests long after her name disappeared from official records, an anonymous legacy that exemplified service without recognition. Lieutenant Commander Torres recognized something familiar in the way the woman in seat 14A moved through the aircraft during landing preparation. Her movements carried the unconscious precision of someone accustomed to working in confined spaces where every action served a specific purpose, where efficiency wasn't just preference but survival requirement. The slight adjustment of her watch, the methodical securing of her journal, the automatic scanning of emergency exits, these were the habits of someone whose training had emphasized preparedness for contingencies that civilian travelers never considered. As passengers began deplaning at Norfolk International, Torres noticed that she waited until most of the crowd had passed before collecting her single carry-on bag. The patience wasn't courtesy but tactical awareness, avoiding unnecessary exposure in crowded spaces while maintaining situational awareness of her surroundings. When she finally stood, her posture revealed the subtle confidence of someone comfortable with command responsibility, though she wore no uniform or insignia that would indicate military background. The brief glimpse of her journal had revealed handwriting that Torres recognized as the precise script taught at military academies, technical diagrams that suggested engineering background, and coordinate notations that indicated familiarity with navigation systems. But it was the signature that had stopped his breath. V. Castellanos, followed by dates and locations that placed her at the center of classified operations that had shaped modern military capabilities. Torres found himself following at a discreet distance as she moved through the terminal, not from any operational necessity, but from professional curiosity about someone whose achievements had clearly transcended conventional career paths. Her route avoided the main concourse crowds, taking service corridors that suggested familiarity with airport layouts and security procedures that most travelers never noticed. At the baggage claim area, he watched her decline assistance from helpful staff members with gestures that conveyed both gratitude and self-sufficiency. Her luggage consisted of a single-wheeled bag that she handled with the efficiency of someone accustomed to traveling light, carrying only essentials necessary for missions whose duration might be measured in hours rather than days. The black sedan that met her at the curb arrived with military punctuality, its driver emerging to handle her luggage with the deference accorded to senior officers rather than civilian passengers. Torres caught a glimpse of the driver's bearing, active duty military, probably senior enlisted, someone entrusted with responsibilities that extended beyond simple transportation services. As the sedan departed, Torres realized he had witnessed something that wouldn't appear in any public record: the return of someone whose contributions to national security would remain classified long after their strategic implications had shaped international relations. The woman in seat 14A represented the anonymous heroes whose service had enabled American military superiority through technological advancement rather than public recognition. The Norfolk skyline disappeared behind them as Castellano's sedan navigated traffic toward a destination that existed in bureaucratic documents but not on public maps. Her debriefing would take place in facilities designed to contain conversations about capabilities and operations that couldn't be acknowledged, where her recommendations would influence decisions affecting thousands of military personnel and billions of dollars in procurement programs. The weight of carrying secrets that could reshape understanding of American military capabilities had become familiar over decades of service in classified programs. Castellanos had learned to compartmentalize information, sharing insights with those who needed to know, while maintaining operational security that protected sources and methods from potential adversaries. Her role required the intellectual discipline to separate public persona from professional reality, appearing ordinary while possessing extraordinary knowledge. Her financial situation reflected the disconnect between public recognition and actual contribution to national security. Years of assignments to classified programs had provided specialized knowledge that translated into consulting opportunities with defense contractors developing next-generation systems. Yet her expertise commanded compensation that reflected strategic value rather than celebrity status. The description of her as a billionaire oversimplified a complex portfolio built on patents, consulting contracts, and investment returns that few people would ever understand. The patents alone represented innovations that had saved countless lives and preserved American technological advantages in aerospace systems, electronic warfare capabilities, and pilot training programs. Her consulting work with major defense contractors provided strategic guidance on programs that would determine military capabilities for decades, while her investment portfolio reflected understanding of technological trends that others could only speculate about. Yet the true measure of her wealth wasn't financial but professional. The knowledge that her contributions had enabled American pilots to operate with confidence in contested airspace, that her tactical innovations had prevented conflicts through technological deterrence, and that her training programs had prepared aviators for challenges that previous generations couldn't have imagined. The sedan turned through gates that marked the boundary between public and classified worlds, entering a complex where Castellano's true identity could be acknowledged and her expertise properly utilized. Here, among people who understood the strategic implications of her service, she could shed the civilian disguise that protected operational security and resume the professional relationships that had defined her career. The final irony of her situation would become apparent only in retrospect. The more successful her contributions to national security became, the more completely they would disappear from public awareness. Future military historians would document the aircraft and systems she'd helped develop, but her role would remain hidden in archives that wouldn't be declassified for generations. Her legacy would live in capabilities rather than recognition, influence rather than fame. As the sedan approached the secure building where her debriefing would take place, Castellanos reflected on the privilege of serving in roles that measured success through strategic impact rather than public acknowledgement. The work had demanded sacrifices that few people would understand or appreciate, but the knowledge that American military superiority rested partly on her anonymous contributions provided satisfaction that transcended conventional measures of career success. The Navy SEALs who stood at attention as her sedan passed the security checkpoint understood something that civilians couldn't. They were witnessing the return of someone whose service had created the technological foundations that enabled their own operations. Their salute carried the recognition of warriors honoring someone whose contributions had given them the tools necessary for mission success, even though her name would never appear in their operational histories. The silence that followed her passage through the checkpoint represented more than security protocol. It acknowledged the presence of someone whose achievements had transcended individual recognition to become part of the institutional capabilities that defined American military power. In a profession that measured success through mission accomplishment rather than personal acclaim, Veronica Ghostwriter Castellanos had achieved the highest form of service, anonymous excellence that would influence national security for generations to come.